Júlia.
Morning.
Bom dia. Bom, gostaria de dar aqui as boas-vindas a todos, agradecer muito a Ilona, Instituto Igarapé pela essa parceria, Consulado da Alemanha também, parceiro nesse evento. Muito legal ver aqui a casa cheia, tem tempo que a gente não vê o SEBRE com a casa tão cheia. Esse foi até um pedido da Jennifer para a gente ter também estudantes participando, então estou muito feliz de ver todos aqui presencial e também que nos acompanham online. Meu nome é Júlia Dias Leite, sou a diretora-presidente do SEBRE, Centro Brasileiro de Relações Internacionais, e é uma enorme satisfação ter aqui a ministra Isabela Teixeira, que coordena o nosso núcleo de clima do SEBRE, Alice, que é uma grande parceira também nova aqui do SEBRE, do Instituto Clima e Sociedade, e Jennifer, it's very welcome to have you here. It's a great pleasure to have you here and with us colleagues and students there. We'll have the pleasure to listen to you. And today's debate, Alice will moderate. I'm passing to English because we have also translation who wants to follow in Portuguese. And Alice will moderate. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Julia. Bom dia, welcome. And to you all, to SEBRE. My name is Alicia Morim. I'm the Partnerships and Communications Director of ICS, Institute Climate and Society. For those who don't know ICS, we are a Brazilian philanthropy that is almost 10 years old now, and we have been working hard to expand, diversify, and build an ecosystem of climate organizations and also to engage different political actors in climate change in Brazil. So it's SEBRE is one of our partners, and it's really, really a pleasure to be here with you all. Well, I will skip a lot of the topics because I know you're here to hear most of them, but I wanted to make a bit of context because we are usually in the climate bubble, and I'm not sure if everybody here considers itself as part of the climate bubble, but we tend to skip a bit of what do we know and what we don't know and what we need to do actually to address such a massive crisis and mobilization demand. So I want to come back to some of the topics that I think our speakers will address in different ways, but just a bit of the context to put everybody in the same page of what we are talking about. Yeah? Questão de ordem. Alguém precisa de tradução? A gente vai continuar. No, let's keep in English. Mas acho que só uma questão de esclarecimento para quem estiver aqui pegar a tradução, por favor, que a gente vai continuar em inglês, tá bom? So, I think we are good. So, the first I'm going to start with what we know. Okay, one is that we are facing a climate crisis, so I assume that you are all here, you already know that, and that it's a crisis that demands urgency. So the sense of urgency, it's something that we tend to say, we tend to think about it, but not necessarily drives our actions. But this is a critical element we all need to think about. The second thing we know is that this is a complex and systemic issue. It's not an environmental issue. It's a development crisis that we need to bear in mind that no single government, no single company, no single organization can solve it alone, which means that we need cooperation. We need a systemic understanding of what we are talking about. The third thing is that we know that to solve this crisis, it implies a massive technological transformation. And that's not only about energy transition, it's of course a big part of it, but it's also about adaptation. It's also about agriculture and food security. So we do need to invest to understand innovation in a broader sense. The fourth thing is that to address this crisis, we will need a massive social mobilization and social ownership. ownership of the process, ownership of how we develop the solutions for it, ownership in terms of the political practices that we put in place to address this urgent, complex, systemic problem. This is not easy. This is something we need to bear in mind. Fifth, and almost the last one, is that we already know that public finance won't be enough to address this crisis. When we think about the evolution of the climate finance conversation as part of the convention and the UNFCCC, we progressively understand more and more that coherent investments to the Paris targets is not either or, is a must. So we need to think of all resources. This is in Paris, this is everywhere, and this is already happening somehow, but the coherence of these different resources uses is something that we are a bit far still to understand how to do it. And the sixth thing is that we know that we are not implementing climate policies in the speed and the comprehensive way that we need. This is about the polycentric climate governance. It's about looking into at the very local level where you have the impacts, where you need adaptation, and how to make it much more consistent with the global level and the national level. We need to look into the different territorial dimensions. And this is something that is a challenge when you think about going towards COP30, when you think about the G20, the momentum that we are working on, it's not about the international space only. It's about going to the domestic and more importantly to the very local level. How we do it, we still don't know. So these are not all the elements, but I think this summarizes a bit of what is the size of the challenge that we have in front of us. And that all of them, our speakers, are working with different lenses, different dynamics, and that I hope we're going to explore in a minute. So without further ado, I wanted to start with Jennifer to give you your time to bring your perspective.
Bom dia. It's wonderful to be here. My goal of learning Portuguese before the G20 presidency has failed, so I'm afraid I'm going to have to address you in English, but thank you, Julia, where is she? And Alice and Isabella and Andre and Ilona. It's an honor to be here, and clearly this year, and more than every year, but it's almost always the case, Brazil is the place to be. And I think it's a big priority for us as Germany, be working closely with Brazil on many, many different levels. Alice mentioned kind of all of the different components of it, and I think we're united in tackling the climate crisis. And although we're quite different in countries, we also have quite a lot of common goals, I think. And I think really working together through a social ecological transformation is what we're each doing on our own, but also together. And I think it couldn't be a better time for our two governments to be kind of aligned in that vision of what we're trying to achieve, noting the very big differences between our two governments, but working towards the same or a similar future. And so that's why I think I wanted to share three key things or key messages with you. The first is really how we're working together as Germany and Brazil to show the success that an social ecological transformation can bring. That's why last year, actually, we had, I think it was 12 of the cabinet, the entire cabinet of Brazil came to Berlin last year in December for our governmental consultations and signed an overarching social ecological transformation partnership. And it's really there to learn from each other on the different levels. And we're already working on a whole range of different pieces of that across indigenous communities, everything from green hydrogen to reindustrialization to the bioeconomy to international climate diplomacy, and investing 2.3 billion euros to support that transformation. Germany, we are trying our best, and we're getting there to walk walk the walk. I think we very much recognize our role to take the lead as an industrialized country and a country that has caused a lot of this climate crisis. We have a goal, not just a goal, a national law to be climate neutral by 2045, 65% reductions by 2030. We're on the way for our 80% renewable energy target by 2030. 56% of our electricity came from renewables last year, more than coal. So this is a big shift from a country that has really been dependent on coal, and have phased out nuclear power as well. But we're also, and this gets a little bit to the social inclusion part, we're also really working on tackling the issue in transport and in homes. And this is the challenge, very challenging part. How we do this together with society in a way that brings that innovation, but also is a transition, and particularly make sure that low-income households don't get additional burden or costs from the transformation. So in that case, 70% of costs are covered by the government for switching to a new heating system. That's in Germany. That's where we're able to afford that, but that's also part of our cooperation with others, I think. And really pleased that 2 weeks ago, our independent environment agency actually said we're on track to meet that 65% target. More to do specifically in transportation, where that's, I think, the hardest one. But I think one of my key things is we are working hard to be prosperous as a country, of course, and also decarbonize at the same time, and it's working. We also have tremendous impacts from the climate crisis, and so it's also in our interest as well. I think the third piece is really just how the next 2 years are just really decisive, and we know this. And so the G20 and the COP presidencies in Brazil has taken on a huge responsibility. And we're grateful for that. We want to work with them to see how we can be working with them to really keep that 1.5 degrees goal limit within reach, but also seize the social and development gains of this transition. And there's two key levers that are coming. One, and here we'll switch in between climate bubble speak and normal speak. So every country needs to do their investment plan, their economic plan, otherwise known as their nationally determined contribution. And the second is the finance conversation, which is what I'm really keen to hear more and learn more while I'm here in Brazil. So on the NDCs, on these plans, how can we, I was in Copenhagen last week at a ministerial, countries want to shift this into plans which are investment plans so that we can look at where is public money needed, where is investment needed, where can the private sector play a role. So moving that forward, bringing in the goals we had and agreed at COP28 on the tripling of renewable energy, the doubling of efficiency, and of course the transitioning away from fossil fuels, which is a challenge we all have. So keen to kind of learn here how Brazil is looking at that, how we build the workforce, key issues, skilled labor, all the jobs that are coming. Second, how to build resilience, of course, and greater safety for the poorest and most vulnerable. And adaptation is an issue that is fundamental to everyone, and I think is finally being a bit more understood what it means. And then how they get underpinned by investment plans. And I think that is a key piece. There's clearly no silver bullet solution, but I'll just close with three kind of provocations are kind of out there. I think the first is how we get strategic about using public funds and improving the conditions for mobilizing private finance, that domestic resource mobilization. The second is the multilateral development banks and the national development banks, how we have them mobilized actually to really be driving private sector investment, innovative sources. And the third is how we address the fiscal challenges faced by the poorest and most vulnerable countries. And that moves into the debt crisis that so many countries have. They have no fiscal space to be able to invest because of the debt crisis. And then also access to funds, which I hear a lot from small island nations. So lots to do together. We have later this week, which is kind of one of the reasons I'm here, our first session in Brasilia for our international strategic dialogue on climate ambition and action. So keen to listen And thanks again for being here.
Thank you, Jennifer. You anticipated a lot of the questions I had for you, so that's great. I just wanted to highlight something, two things. One, when Jennifer mentions that you're striving to be prosperous and decarbonize at the same time, this is something that for Brazil, for instance, is not taken for granted yet. Also, especially on the inequality component. Because one thing is to look at our development from a GDP growth perspective only, and we do have a comparative advantage if you think about our renewables matrix and so on. But how to make that also work to reduce social and income inequalities, we don't know how to do that. So this is something that I would also encourage if anyone is thinking on the audience about that and how to do this. I think this is something would benefit us all in terms of the debate. I'm gonna pass it on to Ilona, maybe to come in with your first remarks, please.
Thank you so much, Alice. So before starting, I'd like to thank Sabri in the person of Julia and Dirk from the German consulate for this partnership. It's an honor for the Igarapé Institute to be co-hosted Ms. Jennifer Morgan and promoting this key debate. I really apologize for not being there in person. Jennifer, I would love to see you, but soon we'll make it happen. So to be also honoring our last conversation, I'd like to start by adding a lens to what we discussed since the last time we met in Davos. And I think Alice already picked up the scene. You know, we can't deny that we are in this triple planetary crisis. We're crossing planetary boundaries. I'm sure Isabella will touch on that. But we are also generating a future and already in some places a security crisis. And I would like to trace back when Igarapé first started looking into the nexus, the two-way nexus, the way we see between climate change or nature disruption and security. And it was at a work, we were called by Germany at the UN Security Council, a working group that you're leading in 2017. So by understanding what were those links, actually, this led that the Igarapé built our own climate and security program that today is the biggest one, where we explore this two-way nexus, so the relationship to understand what will climate change generate vis-a-vis global security, but also what insecurity, and when we nail down into what we call today an ecosystem of environmental crime, how this is actually accelerating climate change and nature disruption. So we're focusing especially in the Amazon basin. So we've been deepening our global engagement with these questions, but also regional engagement. So first at the UN and beyond, through partnering with the UN Secretary General Office at the Common Agenda Initiative, also as a member of his advisory board on effective multilateralism. But also today at the World Economic Forum, where I co-chair this Global Future Council on the Future of Nature and Security. And why I'm saying this is because we actually understand today that the security apparatus will not be able to deal with this crisis. It's not, it's going to generate security problems, but the answers are pretty much on the realm of development, of adaptation, of finding the finance for the countries that are lagging behind to transition very fast. And it's not only let's say, think tanks that are focused on security that are calling attention to this. So Johan Rockström, a scientist that is also in our council at the WEF, he's saying that crossing the planetary boundaries is a security crisis. He's calling for this attention and for is not allowed to this instability to manifest as it's already manifesting in many parts of the world. So we are actually at the verge of, let's say, a big decisions. As I said, we have a very short time to address the root causes of this, because the tools that we have, be at the UN Security Council, be at other levels of, let's say, trying to mitigate this, are not enough. And we know that what is enough, we're not doing well, which is basically really boosting the transition, the finance plans for countries to decarbonize. So I think that's how I would like to link back to the first, let's say, the objective of this. So when we see that what we need is massive investment in delivering public goods, especially the SDGs and the ecological transition plans that Jennifer already mentioned, it's the only way we're going to be able to really stick to the Paris Agreement, but also the Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework goals. And so I think that that's adamant, that's a must. And what do we have to do as a country to do, how can Brazil actually contribute in this very short period of time? I think Brazil is a key country to negotiate the conditions for this to happen, especially for those that do not access neither the amount of resources nor the technological shifts that are needed to boost transition. So as we lead the G20 this year, Brazil sets as priorities financing these ecological transition plans, but also, by doing this, we understand that we have to enable these reforms of the international finance architecture to then unlock the public finance that will then catalyze the private investments that need to be much, much larger than it's arriving today. So second, Brazil is also pushing to the upgrade and the democratization of the international institutions, such as the UN, but other multilateral institutions, to deliver a more inclusive and effective multilateralism, again, to deliver the public goods for those that are lagging behind. And then linked to this, I think the third and very important moral duty that we have of ending hunger and, again, leaving no one behind. So I think all these discussions that are key for the G20, especially the financing for the transition, will be present at COP30 next year. This is paving the way to what we have to deliver at COP30 next year. And it's not only commitments, we need to see actions and we need to see actual impacts and, let's say, the dollars that are already committed to catalyze finance. And so, in my view, we have this opportunity, this unique opportunity and a duty as a country to lead the way towards what we call this, what probably is our last revolution, the green revolution, and bring other developing countries along. So I think that's why it's so important to partner with countries such as Germany that are sharing in different levels with different resources, but they're sharing the same goals. And in a world that we live today, this is not a small thing. So if we're successful, I think this can finally bring Brazil and will also boost others into the developed world league. And I think if we fail as a country, we'll fail many with us. And this is about also responsible choices that we're going to have, because we are in this crossroads of possibilities. And if we miss this last train, which I consider honestly to be the last train, we will then, let's say, Brazil is always said to be the country of the future. So we're not going to realize our present, and we're not going to be the country of the present. So I do believe we can continue being a major breadbasket, but transitioning to a low carbon agriculture and assuring deforestation-free supply chains. We can also become an important producer and provider of renewable energy, including green hydrogen that was already mentioned here, while not only meeting our energy transition goals, but inviting investments from foreign companies and countries that can accelerate their own transition by investing and producing in Brazil. But most important, we must protect and regenerate our biodiversity. And the Amazon forest, of course, is the centerpiece. It's not the only one, but this is our biggest richness. If you think that without the ecosystem services provided by the forest and other biomes that we are very lucky to still host, there is no agriculture, there is no renewables. So our economy is highly, highly dependent on the services provided by the forest. And I think we can no longer pretend this is not the case. So price externalities, these transition plans need to understand the costs that we are bearing to all of us and to future generations. So we have to learn this and to make sure we actually don't, let's say, the trade-offs are responsible, are based on evidence and are the best one for today and for the future. So we have as was already mentioned, the possibility of implementing a Brazilian ecological transformation plan. And I think this has to be accelerated by the right finance models, and this is not a small endeavor. And I think this has to be the focus of the conversation and the delivery in the next 2 years, but also alongside with plans to tackle deforestation in the Amazonia, in Cerrado, Mata Atlântica, and other biomes. So these will be our concrete contribution to climate action, climate mobilization, but also to inspiring G77 countries to take this, but to put negotiations at the right level of ambition, not only to keep the 1.5, but to bring these countries that are lagging behind into the green revolution. And honestly, it's the last one that we have. I don't think we're going to leave beyond that if we don't actually deliver that. So I think partnerships such as the one that Brazil and Germany are ambitioning are key and are vital. So let's not miss this opportunity. And I wish that Jennifer and your colleagues have a very fruitful discussion and actually action plan in Brazil this week. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ilona. You brought so many things that I even lost myself in the middle. But I wanted to highlight two things that I think stood out for me. One is that the question on the massive investments to public goods that Ilona mentioned. Why isn't that happening? I don't know if you have been thinking about, it's political, right? So I think one of the elements that public goods are highly political, and we need to think of climate, especially the political economy of climate, as a highly political process, not only in terms of government negotiations, but of actual interests. Interest groups are all over the process of understanding why are we more or less ambitious? Why are we more or less ambiguous in our political signals? Why are we more or less inclusive in the process? So I think it's having the consciousness of the Brazilian society in particular, from now until COP30, of the high political elements of this process will make us much more critical on our advances and what are we doing in terms of practical actions. We need to make actions happen. So, and this comes back to the legitimacy. I think one of the elements that both Ilona and Jennifer mentioned was to have legitimacy, you need to walk the talk, right? To be someone to lead this process. And to have this legitimacy, we need to implement our policies, the ecological transformation plan, but other policies as well. And this brings, I mean, to Isabella on, you can, he will, but he's the last one. So how do you think about that?
About what?
The legitimacy as a key element to think about in the next 2 years.
Okay, I'm not sure if, first of all, good morning. Welcome, my dear friend. Okay, and later can gossip together. Okay, but now I'll be official, being non-official. But let's see. I try to put the things in different perspectives, and exactly because we have some young people here, and also to understand better what is happening in the world and what's happening also in Brazil. The first thing is that if you go into climate debate, you have the international regulatory arrangement based on international architecture that doesn't exist anymore. Okay? And this is absolutely true, because you have the convention that was established here in Rio de Janeiro by 92, last century, and you have Paris Agreement that we came together exactly 10 years ago, almost 10 years ago, and also the geopolitical conditions, even in 92 and also in 2015, didn't exist anymore. The world changed, everything's changed, and still we are discussing this, considering United Nations or the multilateral system under the same umbrellas, with the same rules, and this means that to have a debate about climate change inside UNFCCC and outside UNFCCC. This is very important to observe, because when you go into political decision, economic decision, who has the power to take decisions? In my opinion, this is happening outside UNFCCC and not inside UNFCCC. This is very, very different when we used to discuss this 10 years ago. Our efforts, and Jennifer and Alice, we came together exactly to manage Paris Agreement, and Brazil was a key player to have Paris Agreement. And you have a multilateral system and United Nations in different conditions that you have today. And we need to understand this because when you go into climate change, it's not only climate change, I mean climate change, developing world, you don't own the narrative, a climate narrative. This is based on the North, this is based on developed countries, and this means that you don't have the political power to address concretely the solutions. We need to come together, even if you have solution providers. Okay, my second point. People would like to discuss now global North and global South. I don't like that because I prefer West and non-Western world, based on the reality, international reality that I used to work hard. And this is very important to observe because we're not only discussing, again, how we come in developed and developing countries, but indeed, who has money to provide solutions or to finance solutions? And this is very important to go into this like-minded block arrangements, G20, BRICS Plus, et cetera. This block, like-minded block arrangement, they are managing climate agenda or climate politics. I prefer to use this expression, climate geopolitics, because climate is part today of the new global geopolitics arrangements, and this is absolutely true. Okay, and my second point, exactly this. So if you have this coming into the political power or the global political power, this is very important to observe. How would you like to manage the solutions for 9 nations? That for me, it's not easy. Okay, you know this. And also, it's very important how you come bilaterally, trilaterally, regionally. What kind of arrangements, what kind of the political arrangement and economic arrangement that will come and bring us together, not only short-term perspective, but long-term perspective. And this is the tricky situation that you have today on the climate change, because this means that we need to understand what you want and how we can come together to share values, but to share more than values, to share common interests. And this is not easy, because even go traditionally in the bilateral cooperation like Brazil and Germany, if you come to discuss agriculture today, we are discussing tropical agriculture versus non-tropical agriculture. And when you go into traceability supply chains, it's not only free of deforestation. I'd like to remunerate that people pay for this, not only that I not have deforestation, but I have soil management with carbon fixation, I can have water security, I can provide really good conditions, social conditions. Who is able to pay for this? Now, nobody. Because the costs are so high. And this is part of the equation of climate change solution. This is true. So we can provide really good systems and models of traceability, but not necessarily the market or international market is prepared to pay for this. So you demand, but you're not prepared to recognize this. This is short-term perspective. When I'm saying that, probably I'm confident that we have all the conditions, all the agreements to come together. But we need a new process. What climate change is imposing to us that we need new process to come together, new process to come together. And this means that we are not prepared to discuss this yet. And why? Because we need new deals. It's the same that's happening in Brazil. You have this plan trans, this transition, ecological transition plan, I don't know yet, but something like this, okay? Yes, because pragmatically, I used to say, come on, which are the deals, political ones, that you have to establish here in Brazil to make sure that you not have setbacks in the future. This is not a 4-year plan because we have a government that took decision to be part of climate constituents. We need to have a pact, political pact with Brazilian society. This is not based on tragedies. This is based on our capacity to provide solutions and to work together. Because this is an issue that's not to be polarized. This is an issue, it's a different perspective issue, political ones, that means not only consider the global commons, but as Ilona mentioned, it's also discuss planetary boundaries. And I'll give an example. You have this Amazonia Treaty Cooperation meeting last August in Brazil, in Belém. And President Lula brought all the head of states together. They signed a letter, Belém letter, if you can read about this. Did you read about this? No. You want to discuss climate change? Come on. Okay, so you need to read, you need to understand what's happening. And this letter, this is the agreement between the head of states and Amazon Basin. For the first time, they mentioned 3 to 4 times tipping point of the Amazon forest. What is this? Planetary boundary. It's the first time that heads of states recognize planetary boundaries. Nobody mentioned this. I had to go to the European Parliament and discuss this there. The guys were so surprised. You want to put pressure on us, but you don't want to recognize what we're doing. This is why sometimes you have difficult to negotiate based on common interests. And that's why sometimes you have this dispute between developing countries that, in my point of view, don't need this, because we need to promote solutions. This is an issue that you need to learn how you should come together in short-term and long-term perspectives. And for this, we need to recognize 3 things. The first one is that not all of the countries in the world, they are solution providers. They don't have alternatives. Brazil is a country that has alternatives to play in short-term and long-term perspectives. So how we should come together, for example, bilaterally, to avoid that? I know we have the crisis, Ukraine war, we have the crisis in Europe, we have the energy crisis, and now we have coal back in Germany. We were together when Madame Merkel finished this, okay? This is the transition. This is something that is out of the screenplay, but this is happening. It's the same when you go to compare, not the same, but the same process when you go to compare China. China raised renewable energy the last 5 years, but also raised coal emissions. And nobody's discussing this, okay? And this, you like to discuss based on bias. And in climate, we need to understand the contradictions, the trade-offs in short-term perspective. We need to manage this with transparency and trust, and also the costs associated to this. Societies must understand how much this will cost. And why? Because we're looking forward to address less risk societies. It's not only security as a traditional way to manage security, but we know that we'll be exposed to vulnerabilities and climate vulnerability and risks that will cost so high. And this is very important to be explained, because in this country, for example, we have part of our political players and also economic ones that are carbon negationists or climate negationists. And this is the second point. When you go to address solution, and everyone discuss 1.5, it's like a mantra. You know this. It's very important. We have IPCC, we have some recommendations, Troika, etc., etc. But 2 things to think about it. The first one, if you go to 1.5, consider energy transition, who you believe that should establish the process and the targets and the outcomes? Who buys oils, not who produces oil. The debate is absolutely in different way. So we used to put pressure on the oil producers countries, but they will have this because someone is buying. And ask the countries that buy oil and coal and fossil fuels, ask them, can you share the scenarios in such a way that you can overlap with our ambition of 1.5, and let's discuss this based on reality or not? So this is very important, because when you go into international negotiations, people used to put pressure on oil producers countries that are producing because they are producing, but someone is buying. And this is very, very important, because when you go into the economic situation of different diversity of the world's countries around the world, we need to understand the role of the insurance industry. We need to understand the role how we pay for risks in the energy sector. That's why we're going to go in the United States, for example, another country full dependent on fossil fuels. It's really hard to replace renewable energy with another source of energy, because you cannot pay for the risks of energy security of the system that the countries have. And this means that you need to come with an insurance system and discuss with them. And this means that you need to reform the international financial systems. Things are interconnected, things are interlinked. You need to understand, when you go into this agenda, what solutions for climate change means. This is a disruptive process. We are not discussing climate financing in a country like Brazil. We are discussing development finance. This is a development agenda. How will you live? How will you finance health, public health? How will you finance education? Today, royalties pay for this in Brazil. Nobody used to discuss, nobody knows where money comes from. Brazil is a country sometimes so funny because you used to say against oil, but you love to have funds for Amazon funds, exactly from oil exploitation in Norway. So coherence, when you go to the new generation, explain the challenge that you have today. This means to restore trust between and among us. And this is something that's why I don't like the idea to have the bias of international debate or national debate. We need to explain how complex it is to change. And what are the different deals that we need to be established exactly to avoid setbacks in the future. This is a country that we eradicate extreme poverty. We eradicate hunger. This is back. Why? Why this is back? It's not only income problems. It's a political problem. We agree that's happening. We as society, we are part of this. So when you go to climate crisis, and you cannot forget it, that you have really different dimension and go into the international debate this century. We have 3 new ages that we have this convergence of the age: climate, innovation, digital age, and also bio age. Nature is emerging as really a political and geopolitical asset. And that's why I used to mention nature politics. This is not based on, I'm sorry, in tree huggers, okay? I know that have people, your country have a championship to tree huggers, it's very funny. But it's not this. This is a pragmatic way to provide solutions, consider adaptation and resilience. And how we value nature, how we'll be able to finance this and to make sure that you can have social feedbacks. Finally, I think, of course, I can discuss different things, but I think that it's very important to go into Brazil. What has happened today in Brazil? Brazil is looking to prepare the NDC. It's good. This NDC must be the country platform, because internationally we are coming exactly to monitor, to understand better ambition, the trajectories that each country around the world will adopt, to make sure that you can decarbonize and also can mitigate and adaptate and have adaptation. This is very important. It's not clear yet how we'll connect things like PAC plus industrial plan plus ecological trans plan, as I used to say. But okay, I think that Anatoly is working hard to provide all the methodologies, et cetera. What kind of modeling, economic modeling we adopt? Okay, what are the risks, the scenarios, how we come with economic growth, and also which role Brazil would like to play. If Brazil is a broker, if Brazil is a game changer, or if Brazil is a bridge builder. I think that Brazil could and should be the 3 ones. But we need to know what you want. This is not a green wishing agenda, not greenwashing, green wishing. Okay, we need to understand that there are costs, and we need to understand, for example, that if going to transition versus transformation, what would be the role of oil industry in Brazil? Not because we have our electric mix based on fossil fuels, but the energy mix part of this, yes. But if we as oil producers, this low carbon oil producer, if we can restore, neutralize this paying restoration as a carbon sink, if this is a transition that will remunerate our transformation, because there are costs, and they are so high, and my feeling is that we need an open dialogue in this society, internationally and nationally, to make sure that we can not only chair COP30, but we need to understand what we'd like to chair the next 10 years. It's the last decade from 2025 to 2035, the last 1.5 Celsius degrees based on IPCC scenarios. And my feelings is what Brazil wants. Okay, if you know, tell me. I'm very curious. Okay, I'm trying to know this, but and this is the role that bilaterally, not only with Germany, with China, with another ones, how Brazil would like to come bilaterally, how Brazil would like to influence peace and security considering international scenarios. We need to understand the impacts of the wars. I was in Ukraine, stayed there 50 days. I know what's happening there. The long-term impacts on food security is impressive. press, there is a good article on Foreign Affairs today. And I think that this country that's better, absolutely key for food security and for energy security around the world must understand better what's happening, the society. So please, don't give up Brazil, but please, the solution will not come from Esplanada dos Ministérios. This is based on our ambition, our dreams, and our responsibilities. Why not? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Isabella. I will ask André maybe to come in, because so many things to comment. So then, and also prepare yourselves for your questions, please. I want to make it more inclusive as possible. André.
Alice, Jennifer, Isabella, and Ilona, first of all, just wanted to say how honored am I to be in this panel. First of all, you are all inspiring leaders, and particularly female aspiring leaders, which is absolutely necessary for the first word that Alice, you used, which is a systemic view. So thank you for having me here in this panel. I'm very humbled for the opportunity. Jennifer knows the company I represent very, very well, Siemens Energy in Latin America. And I will divide my thoughts kind of commenting on what all of you said in two parts. A more pessimistic situation appraisal and a quite optimistic vision of the future. The pessimistic part, particularly Jennifer, is that the whole prosperity of the Brazilian greenness, green energy, a lot of food, green fuels everywhere, comes from a major balance of rain. So Brazil is possibly one of the most impacted and vulnerable economies in the planet to climate change, and it's happening everywhere. From how you well put, climate change increases poverty. The effects of climate change makes people even more poor, more violent. As Ilona knows very well, the action of non-state actors in the Amazonic region and elsewhere makes the deal even more difficult to manage. So yes, we need to do a lot. Jennifer, on the case of Germany and Brazil relationship, last year we celebrated 200 years of diplomatic relations. Siemens is in this country for 150, ThyssenKrupp 180. This is a relationship that goes deep culturally, historically, scientifically, economically. We meet every year to discuss and dialogue. 10% of the Brazilian GDP is German in this country. So there's an opportunity for the German industry to be greener if they play deeper into Brazil to the world. On the bright side, the way I see it, it's the first time ever that I see at least the private sector in Brazil to have a glimpse of three elements going ahead. The first, Brazil can be a green solution to the planet. The second, yes, we need technology, we need money. Our estimations is that the private capital market size of increase is tenfold if we are to reach that possibility, and only with huge cooperation between government and private sector, maybe blended finance, guarantees, and so on, of which Jennifer knows very, very well, may be a way. Second, Brazil has always been a very closed economy, closed into itself from a certain point of view, with an excellent diplomatic body that mirrors what's happening in the rest of the world. However, it's the first time that I see the private sector at least dreaming of building something for the world as a solution for the world. Finally, many of the technologies for green reforestation, agriculture, and so on are available in this country, including the whole supply chain of energy, which I'm part of. So the cooperation possibilities here are immense, and I cannot agree more with Minister Isabella Teixeira that we can do so much more if we want to. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, André. I actually wanted to, when you come back in the next interaction, I wanted to hear from you on what is the climate action agenda of non-state actors towards COP30? I think this is something we tend to think way closer to the COP, but I think we need to think more now, especially in light of what you just described. And also on skills development, because we can have money, we can have tech, but if we don't have the skills development of Brazilian society to engage with those processes, we won't translate this into public benefits for us. And this is something that I think there is a huge potential in the German-Brazilian partnerships to develop. Well, time for questions. Please, who wants to speak? Oh, you already have one? Okay, I'll give you 1 more minute to think about it. Gabriel Estrela is asking how to involve the agricultural sector in the climate balance given the protests in Europe and the absence of the Brazilian agro sector in the carbon market bill. You want to start? No, Jennifer? Sure.
I think, well, first of all, there's so much to grasp on all the interventions that came forward. But I'll jump in on the question. I mean, I think the agricultural sector is fundamental, both for so many reasons. It's the food that we eat. The impacts that are happening on this sector are cataclysmic. I mean, if you look here, but if you look in Europe, in Germany, in my country, the drought that happened last year, and then the impacts, the follow-on impacts on the costs to consumers. I mean, and then also, of course, their role in the solutions side of things, and how both, whether it be on how they farm or the equipment they use, et cetera, how they can be part of that solution. And it's complex politically. You talk about political economy, it's complex. But essential that we find a way forward together. And I feel that the debate is a little bit further behind than maybe the energy discussion is. So I think how to involve, I think partially it is really around, I'm a big believer in having dialogue with all stakeholders. So going out there and both in an organized way, which is what the European Commission is now doing, is inviting the farmers to have those dialogues about how do we get there, whether it be on nature restoration and what kind of land is being set aside and what adaptation plans are. But I also think we have to do a better job, and this is not only for agriculture, but actually for the whole debate, which is around thinking it together. Because the costs to society, the cost to farmers from the climate crisis are immense. And for especially smaller farms, but not only, even larger farms, are going to have high risks. But yet at the same time, that is not connected into the discussion about, okay, what can we be doing together to solve the problem? So I think on that and on other areas, just thinking these different pieces together is key. And looking at, okay, how do we phase in the policies that are needed? We have massive subsidies around the world on agriculture, for example. Maybe we should be thinking about aligning those a little bit more in with the future that we want to build. That's certainly the case in Europe and I think around the world.
Want to comment?
Yes, I can comment concerning Brazilian agriculture, and also let's make clear that Brazilian agriculture, tropical agriculture, is not only food, it's also energy. Okay, this is the first point. So the diversity of agricultures around the world will demand that we should have really innovative vision to convene people to make sure that we can discuss climate change based on realities, not based on something that happened in Amazon region is not happening in the rest of Brazil. It's the case of cattle ranching in Brazil. Okay, and 75% of the beef produced in Brazil, these are consumed by Brazilians, not for international community. And for Amazon region, it's around 30%, 35% of the beef production in Brazil. So we're discussing cattle ranching, critical perspectives, I'm sure, Marcelo Vieira, that this means that we need to have the political and economic power to convene not only public players, but also private players and society to understand not only production, but also consumption. And this is how, in my opinion, we should figure out some solutions that will allow us to have some deals and some agreements, etc., etc. You don't have today this in Brazil. It's happening informally. Unfortunately, okay? This is not an issue that I should discuss is Lula, Bozo, Bolsonaro, etc. We're discussing Brazil interests. I'm sorry. That's true. Yes, this is a tragedy, okay? But this is very important to observe because I'm not discussing the leaders, the political leaders. We're discussing our interests as society. And also, even God, if you want, I can have a low-carbon church. I can create it, no problem. Can convince God. God, come on, let's discuss it together because you can, of course, coming and wait. It's not this. This is not an issue that you can have ignorance as a privilege. Other issues probably yes, but this one no. And why this is important to observe? Because we started discussing this exactly last century. And climate change is supposed to be something that will happen by the end of this century. Do you remember this? We're so young, but we are there. We are there, okay? We are old young ladies, okay? And we remember this very well when we have discussing that have UNFCCC and have Kyoto Protocol, Cancun meeting with KP2 that to failure, you have Copenhagen, we're there. So no, you can tell the story. It's not what's happening today. Climate change is happening. It's happening, of course, with different dimensions, asymmetries around the world, but this is happening. It's not the end of the century. It's happening now. So I think that this is really an issue, a political, a geopolitical one, economic one, technological one, blah, that we need to have a political power to convince people to discuss and to make sure that you can understand what is happening. The agricultural sector is critical for Brazil's new storytelling concerning climate change. It's not necessarily only energy, because bioenergy or economy of biomass will come from agriculture sector, or agricultural constituency. And you need to understand the diversity of players there. You cannot summarize this as ruralistas and non-ruralistas. This is really narrow. This is a myopia. It's something that you can read the society based on one bias or two bias. Forget it. This is not the political reality. We need to open the political rooms to dialogue. It's the same with the international community. Okay, it's the same. You cannot have one reading based on something that I imagine that is happening in the United States. No. Don't be narrow. Brazil must learn this. Brazil must have people coming here, not because we have copy, but because Brazil is a country that's a solution provider. Brazil is a country with peace and more than 150 years with our neighbors. Brazil is a country that must discuss technology because we have technologies available, but we need new technologies. Brazil is a country that has international cooperation with all the countries around the world. We are part of 15 countries in the world that have this. We have international cooperation, all the countries in the world. This is a really powerful asset. Really powerful asset to have dialogue. I can come together with Germany, for example, to discuss what's happening, the consequences of the Ukraine war. This is the last West buffer. I'm not discussing if I'm pro or against. I'm discussing about solutions. There is no food security. The impact of food security and strategic minerals and critical minerals, the impact of energy security, what's the impact that will emerge from the war? Nobody is discussing this. And this is part of our problems. So I'm not discussing if Brazil is this or that. I'm not discussing foreign affairs policy as part. I'm discussing our interests as society. And you don't have the right to ignore what's happening around the world, even in Brazil. Brazilians must have this. Please don't do this. Don't deliver this for another ones. It's your choice. It's our choice. So let's discuss with the agriculture sector. We have different players there. Okay, different players there. And my feelings is that agriculture in Brazil is a solution provider, but it's not the agriculture of the past that took decisions 45 years ago, 50 years ago, that we need to produce food because you'd like not more to buy food internationally. What are the critical decisions that the agriculture sector must take now, consider the next 50 years? This will be based on the scenarios on climate change and Brazil development. It's the same of energy. Okay, we provide the biofuels. We are coming with green hydrogen. What is the role of agriculture sector? It's not only deforestation. Deforestation is illegality. This is a crime. Okay, this is a non-economic carbon. When we go into the economic carbon that's based on agriculture emissions or energy emissions, we are discussing development, who will remunerate this, how the cost for the society. They are the one we need to go against, to tackle, to control. Don't buy products from this. But if you want to don't buy, you need to know how traceability will be applied for that. Nobody knows this. So my feeling is that this is an agenda that's a huge opportunity for Brazil today to invite people to dialogue our future, not because we are the country of the future, as Ilona mentioned. I think that we should be a better country in the future, with pragmatic approach, and make sure that the new generation will be able in the next 10 years to be prepared to manage the country. If not, you're coming to be worried about this based on tragedies. Come on, be pragmatic, work hard, and we'll be a solution provider. And agriculture is part of the solution in Brazil. Of course, that we have bad guys there. Marcelo Vieira is one example, but we need to understand that we have good guys and we have people that want to come with us to discuss this based on the reality and trade-offs and what the new arrangement that we'll be able to provide as a country, consider not only food production, land restoration, but also energy solutions. And this is fascinating. My last comment, will come now a new project in Brazil with electric cars together with biofuels. They're hybrids with really good solutions, okay, high technological development, so we'll be able to buy electric cars. I don't have a car anymore, but you can buy, okay, and this is based on innovative perspective that we have in this country. I hope that you can do with another countries. I hope that you can discuss it as adults, not based on some deliriums, people that want to talk about tragedy. Come on, go to the theater. But in the real world, come on, go to reality. So Brazil is critical for this, and you should come together bilaterally, Germany and Brazil, to discuss agriculture, not what's happening in France, etc., but pragmatically, how should come together, in my opinion.
If I can do a 2 minutes, because I think this is exactly one of the reasons that we're here, is because the geopolitics of energy has completely shifted. Completely shifted. Germany was importing 55% of our fossil fuels from our energy from Russia. What a mistake. We learned the hard way. We've phased that out. We also had to, indeed, last year put a bit of coal up. Coal is also going down. So we have managed to do this, but that means we're looking for new partners, new solution providers for our energy around the world, right? And so the green hydrogen, the renewable energy that Brazil has with a partner that has shared values, but also shared interests, is fundamental also for our foreign policy, for the world that we want to create together. So that is very pragmatic in things like how we're working with the Siemens or how Siemens and ThyssenKrupp are working here in different agreements that are coming forward on the different MOUs that we sign as governments to try and create those enabling conditions or to facilitate that. But that's the opportunity. And I think that the countries that have not diversified their fossil fuel producing, they're the ones who are worried. They are the ones that didn't want the decision to transition away from fossil fuels to happen in Dubai. But those that are diversifying, that have tremendous, we would dream in Germany of having the resources that Brazil has. Seriously, our solar radiation is that of Alaska, right? But we have 56% renewable. So that's just, I just agree with you very much that that's the mindset shift. And I think the whole continent here This is why it's my third trip here, and we're often here in Brazil, but also in other parts of South America because of that new opportunity. Africa as well, Kenya. It is about jobs. How do we get the training to happen? That's what I'm really asking right now, very specifically. So we have to accelerate and make it happen. It has to be detailed, and the financing has to be based on the specific sector, the specific thing that you're needing to do. If it's renewables, maybe it's guarantees. If we move into agriculture or another sector, then maybe it's performance based. But that's the opportunity. It's not the opportunity. It's what we have to do.
Great. So just to get very concrete, one of the things that I have been thinking is imagine if we had like kind of Pronatec, which is a public policy on skills development that in the past for climate that goes all the way from energy to agriculture and different skill set for the future. We don't have that thinking right now. The policy is not, I mean, it's being reshifted, but I think Germany has a big role to play on that. Also thinking that our work at IX, we have been supporting several organizations to work on the Plano Safra, so the Safra, the Rural Credit Plan, and understanding what are the gaps for low carbon transition there. It always goes to the smaller producers' access to funds. It's not about the lack of funding. It's not about the lack of policy orientation, at least not from last year, but it's about access and the very last mile. So this is something to, although
May I two comments?
just
Just a minute, Ilona.
just to come
please,
back
don't
to
sleep.
Ilona
Wait,
and André.
wait. Two things. I remember that I met Jennifer. We met together with Anna, Tony. I think 2 years ago, almost 2 years ago, and we discussed that. Okay, if Brazil will be back, I'm discussing if the future is back in Brazil, not Brazil's back. But I remember that so it's possible that we can have. It was the first year of the Lula government that we in Brasilia. And we mentioned, is it possible that you can have just energy transition program that you have in Germany? You can have just agricultural transition, okay? So what it means, how you can combine interests, okay? And how you can combine a vision considered bilateral cooperation. This is something very important to think about it because this will stimulate, for example, that you can come with Pronatec, etc., as you propose. My second thing, Brazil must know Brazil. We don't know our country. It's true. Okay, when you go into agriculture, for example, nobody knows in this room, probably, I'm sure that Marcelo knows this. When you go into coffee, I have a pleasure to drink, I had pleasure to drink coffee, Brazilian coffee in Ireland and also in Grossland. It was Marcelo, the producer, okay? And I checked, oh, it's the guy, I'm here. Okay, what is this? It's not his case, but I learned that when you go into familiar agriculture, small farm agriculture, the highest income in the world, considered coffee production, is from Brazil. It's around $10,000 per year. When you go to Kenya, it's $100 per year. Nobody knows this. So if you want to discuss things, let's, first of all, learn what's happening in this country. Check the numbers, understand the realities. Make sure that you're discussing based on realities and not based on stories that people like just to share with us. And this means how transformative you can be, should be as a country with responsibility, and make sure that you can provide a solution, but also make sure that you can allow people to have food security. And this, and also energy security. This is a kind of debate that climate change should allow us to come. Unfortunately, you think about the bubbles of climate change, Amazon region, it's true, but this is not enough to address Brazil. So please, know more about Brazil, know more about what's happening in this country, okay? Don't go in fantasies and dream, just work hard and make sure that you can have transition plus transformation without setbacks based on our choice. Brazil is the most important country to produce life around the world, because of biomass, sun, and water. Our choice is now, would you like to take decision to continue to produce life? I prefer to produce life. This is why nature, politics, and climate is so important in Brazil. Back to you. Ilona, I'm sorry, you're back.
Ilona, what's your take?
No problem. Maybe take some more questions, Alice, because we don't have so much time, and then Andrea and I can come back as just commenting on some.
Just, I don't see any other questions from the audience. Yeah, maybe one here.
Hello, good morning. It's a pleasure to be here. I wanted to bring a subject here to the table about the unilateral action that Europe is taking on climate change with the European Deforestation Free Regulation, EUDR. It is known that it will have a lot of impacts in Brazil and other countries that have big forest ecosystems such as Congo, Peru, Indonesia, and things like that. We know that it's a bold decision on the European side, but it doesn't encompass some challenges that we discussed here, such as the inclusiveness with low-income farmers and low-income countries. How can you demand that the products be deforestation free without giving the resources necessary to make that country capable of doing deforestation free products? So I wanted to know, on the German side, how can Germany inside the European Union guarantee that there will be other programs and other policies to help the countries to adapt to EUDR? And on the Brazilian side, how can Brazil take this role as a negotiating actor on behalf of the countries that will be impacted by EUDR? We have some multilateral organizations such as the Amazon Cooperation Treaty Organization, or some informal ones like the Three Basin Group, which is a group that encompasses countries from the major forests from the world, such as Congo and Indonesia as well. How can Brazil use these forums, this fora, to negotiate with Europe solutions that encompass these challenges that we discussed about the capacitation to adapt and transform?
Thank you. I know the question was to Jennifer, but let me just start with them, with Ilona and Andrea first, and then we close here. Ilona.
So, thank you, Alice. And sorry, what was the name of the person that asked the last question?
Fernando.
Fernando. Okay, and Fernando, I'll take that as a person that looks into illegalities. And I think Isabella already said what's the challenge in actually trying that, let's say, to approve and to make sure the methodologies that measure what we can do with our tropical agriculture are taken into consideration in these regulations. But by looking at what I'm looking, regulations, foreign regulations, should be seen to us as a society as a boost to actually be more responsible and to transform faster for our own interest. Because I think, of course, there are as also Isabella has mentioned, let's say we can't put everyone in a boat, in the same boat in terms of responsibility and let's say integrity in corporate practice. And there are lots of players that are doing their best, are using the best technologies, and yes, there are costs, and our government should also be looking into that. But we are, as we said also in the beginning, facing tipping points. And if we don't do internally the job, like the last government we had, if we had again the same government this year, we could actually be passing the tipping point of deforestation of the Amazon biome in these 4 years. And thanks to actually international pressure as well, we didn't. So to say, we need regulation. And we need to do our homework. We need to be able to have credible partners to say, this is fair, this is unfair, and sit down, as Brazil and Germany are doing now. But we cannot hide, we cannot think that everyone is on the good side. And we cannot hide against only, the protectionism argument, which is true in many parts, but we cannot hide behind that to transform what needs to be transformed. So to say, we need trust. We need relationships with partners that we can actually negotiate and come to fair agreements, to fair financing. But we are running out of time, and we're going to have good regulations inside and outside, because that's the only way. Also, the pain will be felt by some economic actors. And to export, just to take into consideration, for example, beef, it's just the major companies that can actually export and meet all the standards. And, yes, they have to face pressure to trace. And why can we trace the meat that is going to the external market and not to the domestic market, which is the biggest market? We have to do better on that. Just to say, time is of essence here, and we don't want protectionism to be, let's say, the main cause for that. But we have to take into consideration our own interests to transform our industries. And I know I'm going to be beaten by what I'm saying here, but by listening and looking into what's happening in terms of illegalities in our supply chains, we will need regulation. And we need that to be taken seriously by the agents in Brazil as well. So, and again, fair ones. And let's discuss what that means. So I came here with a strong lens, just because I'm also seeing many actors that don't want to do their homework, and we have to push them very fast into transitioning with the right incentives, but sometimes you need the carrots and sticks, and I think it's time to transition. And just I wanted just to say two things on the climate and again the farmers, small farmers. There's something that on the geopolitics of today is very important, which is disinformation. The amount of disinformation targeting small farmers and the agriculture sector as well, not only in Brazil but elsewhere, is not allowing a lot of people to understand that it's like, let's say, the changes and this again the regulations and the new rules are actually on their own interest to be followed. So this is a major global discussion. And I think we have to put this in the equation, because it's not only threatening our democracies, but it's threatening our climate goals. It's threatening the capacity of sitting down at multi-stakeholder tables at the multilateral level to agree. So I think we need to do better on that. And there's a whole machinery. And in Brazil, this machinery is also very strong. And people are getting wrong information and are based their voting, their decisions, they're pushing back on wrong and like a deliberately wrong information. And the final comment, I think, in terms of the multilateralism, and Isabella was very right to point that we have, today, multilateralism is much more effective on small, like-minded groups than on the big organizations. And I would say the reality is that we're going to need to have both, but I think also that we need to realize that the states are not the only players anymore on the multilateral front, and the multilateral system, the traditional one, hasn't realized or hasn't been able to include the role of civil society and the role of private sector in this system. And I think it's inevitable that multilateralism, to survive, has to be much more inclusive to be effective. And these rules are to be rewritten. And we have this opportunity of the Summit of the Future in September, in a very challenging time of our world. But Brazil, again, and Germany is one of the key countries, a co-facilitator there. We have to really prioritize this opportunity to come back to the table. And Brazil, as like a champion for multilateralism, has to take a much stronger role in the Summit of the Future. And again, taking the opportunity of the conversation with Germany, I would say it's duty for us to try to reinforce, to revigorate, and to go back to the table, because all these problems that we're discussing here, they're collective problems. If we don't face them as such, we will fail. And fail means a lot to humanity now. But I'll stop here. Thank you so much. And sorry for being so strong in the first question, but I'm seeing what's happening. And I think we have to also stop hiding as a country and face our challenges for our own sake.
I think we all agree that. So thanks a lot, Ilona. André, your last remarks, please.
Alice, just two points. Just building on Ilona's point of view, SEBRI runs a almost 20-year-old security conference together with the European Union, and security against non-state actors is a major issue. Here, a cooperation against organized crime, money laundering, and the works could help us a lot together for both sides. The whole traffic of drugs, human beings, illegal mining, and everything else that ruins our ecosystems is because, like Isabella says, somebody's buying and somebody's receiving money for all of that. And it comes through channels that we cannot alone master. So the house of SEBRI is open. I run the security council in it's a mini Munich security conference, Jennifer. So the floor will be yours if you like also on that space. On talent, skills, the immense transformation that renewable energy has done, for instance, in the northeastern region of Brazil with wind power and solar development is immense. Brazil holds institutions like Senai, which has created the image and funded by also German monies, development money called Senai. Most of these workers, Jennifer, are girls, usually better educated than the boys in the northeastern space. The transformation there is immense. And with the reforms that Brazil is doing, maybe industry will be attracted to lower cost green energy in an area where the pyramid of age is still very, very favorable. So the skill opportunity for collaboration there is already big. It happens, and it could be so much bigger. Thank you, Alicia.
So first of all, maybe just on the security piece, I didn't comment on that the first time, but I would be very keen. We would be very keen to dive deep into that issue. Germany works very, very actively on climate and security. Everything from having skilled climate experts in peace building missions in the Horn of Africa to really be looking at, okay, how can we be avoiding conflict due to climate impacts before they take off, into everything of mainstreaming it into major military, major security institutions. We're actually undertaking our own national intelligence estimate right now on this, tipping points. I mean, so thank you. I'd be keen to follow up on that. And I think the other piece on skills, I mean, this is something that has struck us, I think, in Germany, because as we're going big into renewables, we're recognizing we don't have enough capacity to approve the permits on the local level. We don't have the engineers to be doing this. So I think I'm very keen to listen here, but also to look at, okay, how do we bring both a very practical, there is a lot that's happening between Germany and other countries on this. Also, this dual system that Germany has of training for vocational jobs, etc. But how do we scale that up? Look at, okay, if Brazil is doing its next nationally determined contribution, what are its skill needs based on the drive to net zero by 2050? And how can we be working together with those institutions to make that happen? And I think on the question of supply chains and deforestation, for me, this is an area which is ripe for the type of cooperation that we need between countries, right? We in Europe, we have consumers that this is the demand that we as decision makers get from them. So that's, they don't want to be buying products with deforestation in them. So they are looking for a way of playing their part in the solution in using their pocketbooks. However, that needs to be fair and it needs to be worked on together, which is what there are a whole range of projects that are happening here, particularly around smallholder farmers, to open up the markets for them. And that means having a very deliberate collaboration on that between government. It also means having the quote, enabling conditions in Brazil to move that forward so that we're combining that 2030 zero deforestation goal of Brazil with the economic levers that that Europe can bring with the development cooperation together in a very strategic kind of partnership. And I think those are the dialogues that we need to have, and that's why I so value being here, because if you have a partner that you understands the science and the crisis that we're in, and understands that we each have our responsibility, Germany more than Brazil, but Brazil also is a main player and is a solution provider, then you can go pretty far. The big challenge is focusing and making sure we're getting down into actually the operative changes that will make a difference for people's lives.
On the top of the hour, but
Okay, only, I absolutely agree with Jennifer and also Ilona and Andrea. I think that when you go into supply chain traceability, this means not only food supply, but go to mining, security, and minerals supply chain. You go into another supply chains. It's very important to observe that Brazil must tackle illegalities and informality. Okay, this is very important when you go into Amazon region. You don't have only illegalities, you have informality in supply chains. This means that you need to understand the economic and social realities and make sure that you have time to readdress this. My second issue, only for you, where climate change means that you need to phasing down and phasing out the old world, the world that we still live, and phasing up a new world. And this means that you need to move from subsidies that are so important, for example, for fossil fuels, to incentives, okay, to raise, okay, the green products. This means how private sector will come. You don't have enough money for public money, but we need public money to well-structured things to make sure that you can have private sector based on business and investment return, okay, as the real world is. Okay, this is not philanthropy. This means that to go in economic development, new ways to promote economic development. This is very important to observe because this will take time. And that's why, not only nationally, but internationally, we understand the role of bilateral cooperation or international cooperation, how we should come together. I agree with Ilona when you have to boost things in Brazil, to change Brazil, but we need to understand the reality. And so phasing up solutions, phasing up green products, coming into really concrete solution means that you have to pay for this. Okay, as we are paying today to access fossil fuels and also to access renewable energy, because we need to understand the economic and social impacts on the tariffs and means how this will cost for the society. So please don't go in this agenda like a green dreamer. Be pragmatic, okay? Understand that we have a transformation process and make sure that Brazil is a country, when you say that Brazil is a solution provider, you need to accelerate the phasing up. This means when you go to the fiscal reform debates in Brazil, understand better how you can move from subsidies of the old industry to incentives to the new industry. This is what it means, a new agriculture, a new energy, and how much time this will take. Okay, and be sure that Brazil could not only be a provider, solution provider for the world, but for ourselves. This is the new way to understand how would you like to put apart informality, to understand to go against illegality, and be sure how much it costs for our society to be so transformative. There is no ecological transformation without costs. I'm sorry, but this is true. So, and please, if you go to be tree huggers, remember that stand up for it costs a lot. Thank you.
Thank you. If I may, my last point is that, so this transformation is systemic, it's non-linear, and it has a bit of chaos. So we need to embrace that in the process and not be thinking on, we are gonna have the policy framework and okay, the implementation is done. We're gonna have all the financial resources, implementation is done. It's not like that. It doesn't work like that. And it does require Brazilian social ownership. So I think we are in a good shape to build this leadership of Brazil, to build these partnerships. But we need to have social ownership. Otherwise, we're not going to have a truly socially just transformation. So I hope you enjoyed this. Thank you so much. Congratulations, Sabri, for a really great work you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you. Obrigada.